A muzzleloader is any firearm into which the projectile and usually the propellant charge is loaded from the muzzle of the gun, i.e., from the forward, open end of the gun's barrel. This is distinct from the more popular modern, higher tech and harder to make, designs of breech-loading firearms. The term muzzleloader applies to both rifled and smoothbore type muzzle loaders, and may also refer to the marksman who specializes in the shooting of such firearms. The firing methods, paraphernalia, and mechanism further divide both categories as do caliber, from cannons to small caliber palm guns. Modern muzzle-loading firearms range from reproductions of side-lock, flintlock, and percussion long guns, to inline rifles that use modern inventions such as a closed breech, sealed primer, and fast rifling to allow for considerable accuracy at long ranges. Modern mortars use a shell with the propelling charge and primer attached at the base. Unlike older muzzle-loading mortars, which were loaded the same way as muzzle-loading cannon, the modern mortar is fired by dropping the shell down the barrel where a pin fires the primer, igniting the main propelling charge. Both the modern mortar and the older mortar were used for high-angle fire. However, the fact that the mortar is not loaded in separate steps may make its definition as a muzzleloader a matter of opinion. Muzzle loading can apply to anything from cannons to pistols, but in modern parlance the term most commonly applies to black powder small arms. It usually, but not always, involves the use of a loose propellant, i.e., gunpowder and projectile, as well as a separate method of ignition or priming. Loading. In general, the sequence of loading is to put in first gunpowder, by pouring in a measured amount of loose powder, historically mostly by using a powder flask, or powder horn, or by inserting a pre-measured bag or paper packet of gunpowder, called a cartridge, or by inserting solid propellant pellets. The gunpowder used is typically black powder or black powder substitutes like pyrodex. Typically 2 types of gunpowder, and 2 flasks, were needed, as the priming powder for the pan was finer than the coarse powder used for the main charge behind the ball. Wadding is made from felt, paper, cloth or card and has several different uses. In shotguns, a card wad or other secure wadding is used between the powder and the shot charge to prevent pellets from dropping into the powder charge and on top of the shot charge to hold it in place in the barrel. In smoothbore muskets and most rifles used prior to cartridges being introduced in the mid to late 19th century, wadding was used primarily to hold the powder in place. On most naval cannons, one piece of wadding was used to hold the powder in place and served the purpose of creating a better seal around the shot. Another was used to act as a plug to stop the shot rolling out because of the swaying of the ship. The use of cartridges with both gunpowder charge and ball, made up in batches by the shooter or a servant, was known from very early on, but until roughly around 1800 loading using a powder flask and a bag of balls was more common. The measuring stage for the barrel charge of gunpowder could be avoided by carrying a number of pre-measured charges in small containers of wood, metal, or cloth, often carried on a bandolier. These were known by various names, including chargers or apostles, as 12 were often carried. For most of the time muzzle loaders were in use, a round ball and pre-measured powder charge could be carried in a paper or cloth wrapping. The shooter would bite off the end of the paper cartridge with his teeth and pour the powder into the barrel, followed by the ball encased in the paper wrapping. The projectiles and wads were then pushed down into the breech with a ramrod until they were firmly seated on the propellant charge. Priming powder was usually carried in a separate priming flask and poured into the priming pan, and the lock was pushed down to hold the priming powder in place. After the gunpowder and projectile or shot charge were placed in the barrel, a ramrod was used to firmly pack everything down at the base of the barrel. Then either a priming charge was placed in the priming pan, or a percussion cap was placed on the nipple, the firing mechanism initiated. In a flintlock, the hammer was then cocked to make the firearm ready to fire. Projectile types and history. Muzzle-loading firearms generally use round balls, cylindrical conical projectiles, and shot charges. In some types of rifles firing round ball, a lubricated patch, see Kentucky rifle, of fabric is wrapped around a ball which is slightly smaller than the barrel diameter. In other types of round ball firing rifles, a ramrod and hammer is used to force the round ball down through the rifling. When fired, Either the lead ball or the wrapping grips the rifling and imparts spin to the ball, which usually gives improved accuracy. In rifles firing mini balls, the patch, often the paper wrapping from the cartridge, is used as an initial seal and to hold powder in place during loading. The mini ball replaced the round ball in most firearms, especially military, in the 1830s and 1840s. It has a hollow base which expands to grip the rifling. The combination of the spinning mini ball and the consistent velocity provided by the improved seal gave far better accuracy than the smoothbore muzzle loaders that it replaced. Modern usage. When aiming for great accuracy, muzzle loaders are usually cleaned, swabbed, before reloading, so that there is no residue left in the barrel to reduce accuracy, though in competitions run by the international governing body, the MLAIC, this is prohibited for military rifle and musket events. However, in small arms muzzle loading rifles, swabbing is only done after every 5 to 10 shots. Large caliber muzzle loaders such as cannons are always swabbed between shots to prevent accidents caused by live sparks igniting the fresh charge of powder as it is being loaded. Muzzle loading. Muzzle loading is the sport, or pastime of firing muzzle loading guns. Muzzle loading guns, both antique and reproduction, are used for target shooting, hunting, historical reenactment and historical research. The sport originated in the United States in the 1930s, just as the last original users and makers of muzzle-loading arms were dying out. The sport received a tremendous boost in the 1960s and 1970s. The Muzzle Loaders Association's International Committee, www.mlaic.org, was formed in 1970 and held its first World Championship in 1971. Since then a flourishing industry manufacturing working reproductions of historic firearms now exists in the United States and Europe, particularly in northern Italy near Gardone. In the United States muzzle-loading guns are, subject to a number of qualifications, generally not considered firearms. Subject to state law they may be possessed by persons who might otherwise not be legally allowed to own a firearm. The American National Muzzle Loading Rifle Association holds 2 national tournaments a year in Friendship, Indiana as well as the Western National Shoot event held in Phoenix, Arizona. The Muzzle Loaders Association's International Committee, MLAIC, governs international competition with muzzle loading arms. The MLAIC holds a short-range world championship in even-numbered years and a long-range world championship, 300 to 1,000 yards, on odd-numbered years. South Africa has won the last 5 long-range world championships. Modern use. Driven by demand for muzzle loaders for special extended primitive hunting seasons, firearms manufacturers have developed inline muzzle loading rifles with designs similar to modern breech-loading centerfire designs. Night Rifles pioneered the inline muzzleloader in the mid-1980s, manufacturing and selling them to this day. Savage Arms has created the 10mm2, which can be used with smokeless powder, reducing the cleaning required.
Please subscribe and thanks for watching.